Hello, the narrative is dying. There is a saying that back in the days you could trust the big newspapers, Washington Post, New York Times, and so on. Well, those exist for every country you can think of. But actually, you couldn't trust them anyways because that was all people had, okay? So when the Iraq War began on a lie, that was accepted as the truth, even though people were aware that it was a false claim. Nevertheless, the examples are so many. You can take Fukushima, for example, which is still an ongoing accident. You can take the latest John Kerry speech, where he just did a fair speech, really. I'm not a fan of John Kerry, but he did a decent speech. And he sort of, did like this on the Zionist politics. And, there was a storm, like traitors, how could they, Obama administrations and all that, United Nations is united nonsense. And they have been on the sidelines while people have been killed in the millions over the years. And now, when they criticize illegal settlements, occupation, that's big news in some parts of the world. And why did I say the narrative is dying? Because it is. There are so many news sources now that basically throughout the week, if I actually bother to talk about politics with people, one of three is really like, do we live on the same planet? Where do you get your news from? It's just the opposite. I'm not gonna say like that person is not informed, I'm more informed and bravo me or something, but basically the possibility that we are so separate. And I've been mentioning this as we are in the internet educational age. I sit alone with my computer, you sit alone with your computer, and we both think we're up to something, and that's okay, but the future generation will only have that option. So basically they will not face people who think the other way around, maybe in school, maybe at work, or maybe not. Maybe people don't talk about speak their minds about issues publicly. Most people don't really, because if they did, we wouldn't be in the world we have today. But anyway, the narrative is dying. There is no true news, no fake news. For example, look at the alternative news that were sort of good years ago. Many of them have now turned to sort of niched propaganda machines. Some are promoting Trump, some are really promoting like alt-right and all that, and they have become to be very, they've gotten tunnel vision. So one can claim they are no longer alternative media, they are agenda media, like every media source out there, and that's fine. Be subjective. I'm one of those people. I whenever someone says this is objectively, be careful with that, because people like to cuddle up in their own opinions, okay? And that's fine, be honest about it. That's better than trying to sort of sneak in your agenda, which is a more deceitful way of doing it. But there is no uniform media outlets, and it's going to get more and more balkanized, to use that phrase. And in the future, we will have more occasions of people coming over a cup of tea and just discussing something and realizing, wow, we live in the same city and we are totally not informed in the same way. Like, where did you get your information? Where did I get mine? Oh, you are beep and you are beep. So, one will sort of label the other media source the person uses. And we also have the problem of, if you don't like a media outlet, you can still enjoy some articles from there, and people have a hard time with that. I don't. But anyway, as the narrative, the sort of idea of what's going on in the world is dead, basically, or soon about to die, we will no longer have a unitarian historical perspective. Like, for example, I saw statistics of French people after World War II. It was like vast majority who said, the Russians did the most sacrifice for World War II. I mean, they lost the most, they spent the most, and so on. You can see like the diagram. It was really like 70% or something, and they did that in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and it's changed. So it changed over to become that the Americans did the most. So attitudes change. And if you come to the Balkans right now, where people are still in this sort of nationalistic, quasi-ethno tribal system, while the world is sort of progressing, people and politics here are sort of changing the labels of former work of people who were who did war crimes, basically, in World War II and so on. So they are trying to sort of rebrand them to become like national heroes. And in Japan, you have the same thing. They still haven't basically said sorry to the Chinese for ruining, millions and millions of people's lives, raping and, destroying China for no reason at all. So, and the women that the Japanese army used as, sex labor and all that. I remember an article where they claimed, that was not the regular forces and so on. So they don't want, everybody's changing their history. And the problem with that is, if humanity must move forward, go to the stars. I'm one of those people. I think I'm a futurist, basically, in one way or another. It is of benefit for all of us to settle down and realize what is and what is not, and that's not going to happen in the near 100 years. So we're going to have more fragmentizing history. History is going to be revisionized, or how do you say, changed, basically. And the media outlets will become like clubs, like football clubs. You know what you're gonna get if you watch this and watch this and watch this, and the narrative is basically dead. So it's you can sit there in front of your computer and realize, I've checked the sources, I'm informed, but basically you learn that from someone or some source anyway. And the sad thing is really like people who have first-hand experiences of invasions, wars, genocides. They are either not in the... They don't have the practical stuff to get the information out, or they are old, or they are, just struggling with life. So the narrative is constructed of people like you and me who live comfortable lives, basically. And for us, this eventually becomes like an infotainment. People always have this sort of warrior attitude behind the computer. I'm so informed. Yeah, but what are you doing to change anything, really? Like you can say, you can tweet and realize, that's fake news, that's real. But what are you doing to actually change anything? If you're not doing anything at all, just doing one thing per week is good enough. And this is not to put anybody on the spot. This is how I think for myself. What do I do? It's no use to sit here and sort of be smart about what's right and what's wrong according to me. But you have to choose something. You have to be subjective. I think this. I think this is good, and I'm going to put my money, time, and effort as far as I can into this sort of area or whatever that is. So things needs to be crystallized, and basically the ideal would be to have a sort of agreed upon news and history. Everybody would just chill down and move forward, but that's not going to happen, and I think it's going to increase actually. And as I said, all these sort of news events, for example, who is hacking the United States? Some say it's the aliens, US and the aliens, they have a thing, they share technology. Some say it's the Russians. Okay, probably. I mean, I think everybody is trying to hack everybody. And maybe Obama has been too soft on Russia and, tries to sort of make up for that now. Or is Saudi Arabia hacking the US? Or is Israel hacking the United States of America? They don't need to hack, because every US president has to swear allegiance to AIPAC, to Israel. So when you're on the inside, you don't actually need to hack anything. And so maybe Russia is hacking, the US is hacking everyone, listening to everyone's phone calls. They have the technology and the means for it. So what about that? How does that change your life? How does that change your community, the people around you? How is that? What role does that play in this sort of narrative game, where people sit and just soak up information behind their computers and share and tweet and all that? How does that change anything? Because it's like, if you want to invade a country, you have to put boots on the ground. If you want to change something, you have to put your money, your tongue, your action where your actual belief system is. If you don't do that, that's just, toilet thoughts. So nobody's wiser for realizing anything if you don't act that upon the world. To some degree, more or less, that doesn't matter. Don't feel pressured. I don't feel pressured. Just do what you have to do. But realize that all this narrative game is in the end an illusion. What do you do when you leave this house? How you greet your fellow neighbor, your somebody in your city, what you do to benefit your community, yourself, your family if you have, your friends, your whatever. That's what matters. So always go from the big to the direct, what can you do? And that's always right, that's always true. There's nothing false about that. So you can have false news, right news, whatever you think. The narrative is dead. You have to focus. I think so. Everybody has to focus on what they can do each day, big or small, doesn't matter. Sometimes you do something big, sometimes you do something small. That's that. So take care and all the best.